Brenda Wood, and I am back again to do another interview about incarceration, and I am with Matt Clark, and he is running for office. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself first, and then we'll start with the questions. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and tell him a little bit about what you do, what your background is, and why you're running for office.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Matt Clark. I'm the libertarian candidate for Kansas House of Representatives in District 23, which encompasses pretty much eastern half of Lenexa, a little bit of Shawnee, and the western edge of Central Overland Park. My background, I'm an airline pilot by trade. Not a whole lot to do with politics there. It just gives me a lot of time to read and study. I have a lifelong interest in history is where this started. Minored in history in college, and just started to see the endless growth of government. And with that,
that's an interesting way to put it.
And with that never-ending growth of government, you continue to see more and more injustice the bigger government gets. So that's what's driven me to the Libertarian Party, who've been champions of extremely small government for a long time, and they've been very consistent on these criminal justice reform issues that have really driven my campaign. They've been focused on these issues for decades. Since, I'm 31 years old, and they've been talking about these issues since before I was born. So I'm happy to join that party and kind of carry on that flag and hopefully make some progress on these issues.
Well, progress definitely needs to be made. What's the first thing you're going to do if you get elected?
First thing I'm going to do, a whole lot of bills need written, but at most I would be one of 5 libertarian candidates or libertarian legislators. The best case scenario, I'd be one of 5 out of 125 seats in the Kansas House. So this is not
be the
something.
Minority.
I'd be the minority within the minority.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be a very. It would require a lot of work with the Democrats and Republicans to find that common ground. So looking at criminal justice reforms from a frankly from a cost-saving measure is one of the first areas where I'd really be going to work on. That is, money is the language in Topeka, and as much as you love to talk about the justice and the rightness and making people more free, money is what gets things done in Topeka. So.
Yes, well, I'm afraid that's what causes a lot of things throughout the world.
Yeah.
So, speaking of criminal reform, how do you feel about our current judicial system?
The current judicial system is there's not a lot of justice going on in our judicial system, our criminal justice system. It's a lot on punishment. I'm not a big fan of the plea bargaining system that we use. A trial is supposed to be a right. A trial by a jury of your peers is supposed to be a right. And what we've developed is this plea bargaining system where if you don't take a plea, you are punished, and the prosecutor will go after the maximum possible sentences.
Absolutely, because you're going to trial.
Because you've made them go through the effort of going through trial. And that is just not the way it's supposed to be. If you think about how many criminal cases go through the system that were pleaded out every year, if we had a trial by all of those it would be extremely expensive, first of all. But think of how often you would have to be called into jury duty.
Yes.
You'd be called into jury duty 5 or 6 times a year if we actually took all these cases to trial. I think if people actually saw what these people are actually being convicted of, we would change these laws in a real hurry.
Yes, I agree.
Due to the cost and due to people actually witnessing what's going on in the criminal justice system. Now, this is not something that's going to happen, but we need to definitely get back towards trial by jury of your peers as a right, not a punishment.
Yes, I had seen some paperwork where somebody was going up against being indicted to the grand jury, and the prosecutor had basically said, well, they're going to be up against a jury of their peers. Well, what I have seen is people are really not educated in how the system works. So this person who did not want to indict this person said, well, I guess if he's going to go up against people of his peers, then we'll let 12 people decide his fate. But in reality, that brought down the indictment it gave the prosecutor the ammunition to go after this person, prosecute, and then it's basically a lawsuit against that person, which could involve jail time, just because the people really were not educated about it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, do you feel that our due process is fair?
Not currently. There's not enough due process. We've gotten away from it. Due process is a good thing, and it just doesn't feel like we see that as much as we should. Our public defenders are completely overloaded. I know
Yes, they are, and they work hard.
They do work very hard, but as I saw someone, I believe it was your interview recently, that someone described it as basically just they just plea bargain. They're just plea bargain brokers.
Yes, that's
brokers
exactly
or something
right.
like that. Now that doesn't describe all public defenders, definitely,
No.
but they're completely overworked, and so there's not a lot of due process in that respect. And of course, another major issue we're facing in Kansas is civil asset forfeiture. There is no due process in civil asset forfeiture. Even the legislature continues to not really address civil asset forfeiture. They made it more transparent a couple of years ago. So there's an online database now. That's a good start. But there seems to be no momentum towards reducing it. In fact, with a anti-vaping bill that was being discussed in committee last year, it made illegal for people under 21 to possess tobacco products or vaping products, and it authorized the forfeiture of those products. Specifically in the bill, it said without due process.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a major issue that has to be fought day in and day out in Topeka, and I'd love to be able to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I think it'd be wonderful for somebody to do that. Do you feel that prosecutors follow the due process the way they should?
Some do not. You have to pay attention to those elections. They're very important elections. Too often we don't even see competition for these seats, though. But a reminder to people watching that it is a public position. It's an elected position, and that is how you hold the prosecutors accountable, is through the election process.
Yeah, I live in Leavenworth County, and our prosecutor ran without anybody.
Yeah, and I live in Johnson County, and I believe this is Steve Howie's first opponent in 12 years. I could be wrong on that, but it's been a while since he's faced an opponent at all.
Wow, says a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about incarceration?
Incarceration it's necessary to have that as part of the system.
Oh, I agree.
So just to make that clear, it's necessary to be part of the system. Where we go wrong, one of the many ways we go wrong is incarceration. We take people's humanity away while they're incarcerated. Being separated from society is punishment enough. We don't need to dehumanize them while they're there.
And that does happen.
It absolutely does, and there's not. There's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of different specific reforms that could deal with improve the incarceration process, but rehumanizing them would be a really good start.
How do you feel about programs that are in place for them now? Because eventually they're going to re-enter our community, and they're going to be sitting beside you, and they're going to be back as people who are contributing to society. But I have seen that there's not consistency in the prison systems on programs to help people to, when they come out, number one, to be rehabilitated, and two, to be able to be an active, productive member, where they're not going to have a chance to fall back into what they used to do. So to come out there and be productive and help others, and to find the right jobs and find the right places to live. How do you feel about programs that can help that?
One big problem seems with programs is that most of the programs are focused on the last year or two prior to release.
Yes.
Whether it's a 7-year sentence, even just something, as sad as this is, as small as a 7-year sentence, that's 5 years of wasted opportunity to rehabilitate, which is the written intent and purpose of incarceration, is to rehabilitate.
Right.
But that is not being done. So we need to make sure programs are available throughout your sentence, so that you can get help you need earlier on in your sentence. It might keep you from doing things to increase your sentence while you're there, which certainly happens.
Right. But it might help you get released early.
It might get you help released early.
Yes.
So, especially if we can get around to more good time credits and things like that. And the other thing, the government needs to get out of the way with regards to programs.
That's an interesting way to put it.
That's much of my platform as a libertarian, is getting government out of the way. People want to come in, groups, organizations, especially the Christian ones, but there's all sorts of non-religious organizations. People want to help.
Yes, they
and Department of Corrections doesn't let them, or it's a big process to let them, or they only let them help certain people who meet certain criteria.
Yes, my personal
get out of the
opinion.
way.
Yes, exactly. My personal opinion on that is, I think if they let more people in, the public might see what's actually going on. That's just my personal opinion.
There's some validity to that,
yes.
I'm sure.
So they want to keep people out as much as possible, but they have to let them in.
Yeah.
They do have to, so they control who's coming
Yeah.
in and what's going on. So do you believe in second chances?
Second, third, fourth, fifth.
People make mistakes. We make them every day.
Yes.
Yes. And for, if you believe in second chances, then you obviously believe people can change.
Oh, absolutely.
And do you feel that, 1, 2, 3 strikes you're out rule, the sentences tend to stack and grow based on your past? If you've already done the time, and let's say 10 years has gone by, and you get in trouble for something else, and now they're punishing you again for your first 10 years that you've done, and this new crime, how do you feel on that?
I'm not a big fan of that. I definitely think each crime should be handled on its own. Unless they're directly related to each other on the same day at the same event, committing multiple crimes.
Yes.
Each crime should be treated separately. There's no public good being derived from this stacked sentencing system. There's just none.
People don't realize what it does to the family. And when the person that goes to prison, their family tends to suffer as well with them. So it's like Brandon said on an interview with the Kansas Coalition for Prison Sentence and Reform, that the whole family goes with them, because now somebody's uprooted from their home, and maybe it was the breadwinner, so now let's say it's the man of the house who's making a nice salary, just up and is gone. The wife, who may or may not have a job, now is forced to have 1 to 3 jobs to put the roof over the kid's head and to pick up where the husband left off. And although people say, well, he shouldn't have committed the crime, I get that. I believe that prisons should be there, and I believe that there are some people that should never come out. I'm not saying that they should. Yeah. However, I do think that we need to look at each crime individual. So with that being said, what's your first thing you're going to do if you get elected on prison reform?
Oh, prison reform.
It's a big area.
I think the area that I'd have the most chance of success would be addressing fines and fees in prison and then on probation and parole. We stack the deck when they get released from prison with fines and fees left over from their prison sentence, and then fines and fees to be on probation and parole. I think that's one of the easiest things we could do, is to, again, get the government out of their way and
they're starting over now. They've got bills coming out the door.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And people don't realize how much we charge people to be in prison. Oh, you go to prison, you get your free dinner, your free bed.
It's not like that. That's right.
I mean, some people are paying, I believe, up to $600 a month for an upgraded room in prison, which is not much of an upgrade.
No,
I'm sure.
it's not.
But being in prison is absolutely not free, especially if you want to support a family. It's not free. So I think eliminating that financial burden would be one of my first targets that I think could get broad support from Republicans and Democrats.
On the federal side, I know you're running on the state side right now. There's halfway houses when they come out of prison. The state side, not so much. So is there a possibility you might be able to push something along? Because what I'm seeing with a lot of interviews that I'm doing is people get out of prison, and if they got nowhere to go, they're just turned out to the streets. The state doesn't care, or they'll keep them longer. It depends on, I guess, the situation. But I'm seeing that there's not a whole lot of halfway houses anymore on the state side.
Well, I need to look. I'm not familiar why there's not so many halfway houses. If it's just a financial barrier, or if there's a regulatory barrier there, and that could be city code, county code, these different regulations at the city, county, or state level that impose financial burdens upon halfway houses that meet. They got to spend a certain amount of money on lawyers to get the government's permission to run a halfway house. Not that regulation isn't necessary, but my first instinct would tell me there's probably some sort of regulatory burden that we could help try to ease or prohibit counties and cities from imposing on halfway houses. As far as the state budget directly paying for halfway houses, with the state facing nearly $1 billion budget shortfall, that's going to be a hard sell. That would be a hard sell. So probably looking at the regulatory burden related to halfway houses and seeing what obstacles we can get out of the way of people who are trying to help and provide that service is the best way to start.
A lot of people that are homeless because of that. So when the weather turns cold, then they try to maybe go commit a crime so they get back in the system so that they have heat and food and things.
Or just get charged with trespassing for trying to shelter.
Might get a couple month sentence and they're back in. And at that stage of the game, it to me feels like sometimes our system sets the people up to fail. They don't allow the full rehabilitation, and then they don't allow them to have success once they come out, so that they are not a repeat offender.
Yes.
So it's my opinion that something should be done there, and I know you're not in office yet, so you can't really answer that. So if you're in office and you have this one thing that you're going to stand on, what is that going to be? If you're
the one,
it doesn't have to be incarceration. What
is
you're going to stand on?
The one thing I'm standing on is fighting for freedom for Kansans. And as I've said, that is getting government out of their way. There is a limited necessary role of government, but it has grown into way too many aspects of our lives. So if we can keep that government limited, if we can keep the power of that government limited to keep us more free, the less power that we hand over to the state, the less injustices the fewer injustices can occur.
Okay. Do you believe that a felon should be able to vote?
Yes.
All right, so we are going to finish up now and talk about, if you were in office, one thing you're going to stand on is basically getting the government out of the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do believe that felons should be able to vote?
Yes.
And how do you feel about them voting while they're on probation or parole?
Especially if they're out of prison, I don't have any issue with them participating in that process. They've served their time. Prison is the sentence. Probation and parole are supposed to be there to help them.
Yes.
We still view probation and parole as punishment, but I'd prefer to work probation and parole into being something that's supposed to help them, in limiting, they're drastically reducing the amount of time people spend on probation and parole.
I would like to see that happen. I've seen a lot of the defense attorneys talking about they've already done the time. Probation and parole is just an extension of that time.
Yes.
So you have somebody that's done 10 years and they got 5 years probation, which some people only get a year, some people don't get any.
Yeah.
There's no consistency with that. You're still belonging to the government at that stage of the game. You still have to check in, you still have to do your drug test, you still have to do whatever it is that your probation or parole guidelines are. So you still are the government's, and you can't travel. You still have to get permission to do things from your probation officer.
And the same is true for the drug offender and the violent offender registry.
Yes.
I think we do need a sex offender registry.
It
needs some work done
Yes.
on that front as well. It has
Now,
flaws.
state of Kansas, everybody has to register now. Is that correct? Or certain people? I think if there's some crimes that you have to register. If you're a drug offender, sex offender, and I'm thinking there's something else.
There's a violent offender.
There's a violent offender registry.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've seen a lot of people moving to Missouri because you don't have to.
It's encompasses most crimes are summed up by those three things.
Yes.
Even though a lot of these drug crimes, we libertarians don't view as crimes because there's no victim in the crime. But yeah, there's very few states with drug or violent offender registries. We spend millions of dollars on that, and it's not as part of parole or probation. So as far as the state's concerned, it's not part of their punishment. But if you dare violate the terms of that registration, the penalties are sometimes more severe than the offense that got them on the registry in the first place. So I would love to completely abolish those two
Do you
registries.
feel that a felon should be punished for the rest of their life for what they did, maybe, when they were 18 years old, or anything, at any age for that matter? I see that we tend to judge people, and we, the crime has happened, they've done their time, and 20 years later, they're still having to check off that little box on the job application that says they're a felon, or try and find a place to live, have to say, yes, I'm a felon, and a lot of times they get turned away because of that.
Yeah, unless the sentence from trial was a lifetime sentence, then no, I don't think they should be treated as or punished for the rest of their lives. The government can do their part to take that checkbox out of their job applications. I don't like the government telling private companies what they can and can't do with their hiring process too much. There's a little bit of a role there. But I would strongly encourage private companies to give these men and women a chance, because they have paid a severe debt to society by being convicted of a felony, and they're worthy of a chance. So I would encourage them to get rid of that box, or if that box is checked, to give them a fair shot.
At least be able to explain why.
Yes.
Because sometimes the crime is really no different than somebody else that's already done, just hasn't got caught. And there's a lot of violent people out there that have just never been in the system.
Definitely.
Same way with sex offenders and anything else. So, we all commit some type of mistake. I'm not going to say crime, I say mistake.
Yeah.
But even a driver's license, you can get it revoked because too many tickets is a misdemeanor. People don't realize that, but a speeding ticket is a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for letting me interview you. I wish you well in the election. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we shut it off?
No, that should be all. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it. Thank you.